I'm going to need your badge. The words landed before I understood why I was in that room. HR pushed a small cardboard box toward me. My manager, Trevor Whitmore, stood near the door with his arms crossed. He did not look at me. He looked past me, like I was already gone. You're being terminated effective immediately, HR said. Please clear your desk by noon. I checked the clock on the wall. 11:07 a.m. Through the glass walls, I saw people from accounting staring. One woman covered her mouth. Someone else leaned closer to see better. My coffee was still on my desk upstairs. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but my voice stayed steady. My name is Madeline Brooks, I said quietly. And I'd like to know why. Trevor finally looked at me. He smiled. Restructuring, HR said without blinking. Restructuring. We had just hired 3 new analysts last month. I looked at Trevor. That smile again. Small. Tight. Almost pleased. This was not restructuring. This was punishment. 3 weeks earlier, I had sent a report about serious risks in our new server rollout. I had warned that skipping patch validation could crash the system under heavy traffic. I had written everything clearly. Trevor had called me overly cautious. Now here I was. I did not cry. I did not argue. If this is performance-related, I asked, may I see documentation? There's no need, HR replied. That told me everything. This was not about work quality. It was about ego. And I knew the demo for investors was scheduled at 4 p.m. 3 weeks before that meeting, I had sat at my desk staring at lines of code. Something was wrong. Logan Pierce had pushed an update into staging without full validation. I checked the logs twice. The patch sequence was incomplete. Failover testing was skipped. I documented everything. Compliance gaps. Security risks. Load stress concerns. I sent a full report to Trevor. He called me into his office. You worry too much, he said. We don't have time for delays. I reminded him that the system carried live client transactions. He waved his hand. Logan has it under control. Logan once asked me where archive backups were stored. The investor demo was important. Everyone knew that. But cutting corners on infrastructure was dangerous. I saved my documentation in 3 places. Just in case. When I walked back to my desk after the HR meeting, the office felt louder than usual. People pretended to work. Trevor clapped his hands once. Madeline's moving on. We thank her for her contributions. Contributions. Like I had won a retirement award. My desk was neat. I always kept it that way. I packed my framed photo of my parents, my notebooks filled with architecture maps, and my blue ceramic mug. My hands did not shake. Inside, though, I felt like someone had punched me. I built the migration system 2 years ago. Every server mapping. Every backup path. They were gambling with something they barely understood. At 11:58 a.m., I tried my badge at the elevator. Red light. Deactivated. Trevor walked beside me to the lobby. You'll land somewhere, he said lightly. I paused. You should delay the demo. He laughed. I walked to my car with my box in both hands. The sun felt too bright. I sat in the driver's seat, but did not start the engine. I replayed everything in my head. 2 years earlier, the company was failing. Systems were slow. Data was scattered. I had designed the full migration architecture myself. It took 6 months of late nights and cold coffee. I built layered backups, failover switches, step-by-step patch sequencing. It had not failed once. The new rollout Logan handled touched the most sensitive layer, the transaction engine. If patches were installed out of order, load balancing would break. I had written that clearly. I had warned them. I started my car at 12:10 p.m. I did not feel angry anymore. I felt certain. At 3:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. The caller ID showed Naomi Caldwell, our senior compliance officer. I answered. Madeline, she said quickly. Did you remove anything from the server before leaving? No, I replied. I didn't touch anything. She exhaled sharply. The transaction logs are freezing. Orders are lagging. I closed my eyes. Did Logan complete patch validation in sequence? I asked. Silence. The demo starts in 18 minutes, she whispered. My heart did not race. It sank. It's the patch sequence, I said. If load hits before validation completes, the database locks. More silence. Then, Trevor said everything was stable. I looked at the clock in my car. 3:44 p.m. He was wrong, I said quietly. I drove home slowly. At 4:03 p.m., another call came. Naomi again. It's down, she said. Her voice shook. Investor login triggered the crash. Dashboards froze. Transaction engine locked. IT can't restore it. I leaned back in my seat. I picture the server room. The blinking lights. The hum of machines. All still working exactly as designed. The failure would be where the sequence broke. Did they skip stage verification? I asked. Yes. That single word told the whole story. I had written the risk scenario on page 12 of my memo. Trevor called it theoretical. Now it was real. By 4:17 p.m., the entire operations floor was in panic. And I was sitting in my driveway. At 6:02 p.m., I received an email from corporate legal. Subject line, documentation request. They wanted copies of any risk assessments I had submitted about the rollout. Attached was my original memo. Highlighted. Forwarded to executive leadership. Someone important had finally read it. I forwarded them everything. Time-stamped emails. Risk charts. Trevor's reply. Proceed as planned. I stared at that sentence for a long time. It felt strange. At noon, I was escorted out like I had failed. By evening, they were reading my warnings. I did not feel happy. I felt calm. Because facts do not panic. Facts wait. The next morning, the board postponed the investor call. An internal audit began immediately. I learned this through Naomi. They're digging through every email, she said. They're asking about decision timelines. Good, I replied. Logan sent a company-wide message blaming legacy architecture weaknesses. Legacy architecture. That was mine. Except it had worked perfectly for 2 years. The crash happened exactly at the new patch layer he modified. The audit team requested a meeting with me. I agreed. I did not prepare speeches. I prepared documents. Because this was never about emotion. It was about proof. I walked into headquarters the next day with a folder under my arm. No anger. No tears. Just facts. 3 executives sat across from me. Their faces were serious. Why were your concerns not escalated? One asked. I slid the email chain across the table. They read silently. I watched their expressions change. Trevor's response stood out clearly. Proceed as planned. One executive leaned back slowly. You predicted the exact failure pattern, he said. Yes, I replied. Did you remove any system access before termination? No. I had not needed to. They thanked me for my time. As I left, I sensed something shifting. Not sympathy. Accountability. By the end of that week, Trevor was placed on administrative leave. The memo said it was temporary. Security escorted him out. A former coworker texted me, "You were right." I did not celebrate. I updated my resume instead. Enterprise infrastructure architect. That was the role I had actually been doing. Then another twist came. External consultants reviewed the crash. Their conclusion was clear. The system design was sound. Failure resulted from deviation from documented protocol. Documented protocol written by me. The board requested permission to use my original architecture as company standard going forward. I allowed it. With proper credit, a board member contacted me privately 2 days later. He did not apologize. He offered a consulting contract. Short-term, high rate, remote. I thought carefully. This was not revenge. This was leverage. But I also remembered being escorted out at noon. I appreciate the offer, I said. But I've accepted another opportunity. Because I had. A competitor reached out after hearing about the audit. They called me strategic, not overly cautious. 2 weeks later, Trevor resigned. Official statement. Pursuing other opportunities. Unofficial truth. Regulatory fines. Investor doubt. Board pressure. Arrogance has a price. 4 months later, I walked into my new office. It had windows. Real sunlight. My team asked for my risk assessments before every major update. When I said, we should delay until validation is complete, they said, okay. No ego. No shortcuts. One afternoon, I saw a notice from my former company. They had implemented my original patch sequence exactly as written. Documentation credit remained unchanged. Authored by Madeline Brooks. They thought noon was my ending. It was only their countdown. By 4 p.m., their server was down. By 6 months, their leadership changed. And I learned something important. Your worth is not decided by the room that underestimates you. It is proven when that room collapses without you. And I never looked back. Absolutely. Continuing with chapters 14 to 25, maintaining first-person past tense, grade 7 clarity, tight pacing, consistent timeline, and escalating emotional payoff. The week after Trevor's suspension, more details surfaced. Naomi called again. They found something, she said. During the audit, investigators discovered that Logan had skipped not just one validation step, but 3. Each skipped step saved about 40 minutes. 40 careless minutes that cost the company millions in frozen transactions and lost trust. Worse, the system logs showed that Trevor had approved the fast-track override personally. He had signed off. That mattered, because until then, he had implied Logan acted alone. I sat at my kitchen table while Naomi explained this. My laptop was open, and I was reviewing an offer letter from the competitor company. I felt no anger, just clarity. Trevor had tried to erase my credibility. Instead, his own decisions were now documented in cold, timestamp detail. And unlike office rumors, logs never lie. The board released a second internal memo 2 days later. Logan was being reassigned pending review. That was corporate language for demotion. A former coworker sent me a screenshot. His corner office had already been cleared out. The irony did not escape me. 3 weeks earlier, he had joked in the break room, Madeline triple checks everything like the world's ending. Now the world had not ended, but the demo had. The investors demanded answers. Some postponed contracts. Others reduced commitments. The cost was not just technical. It was reputation. The consultants confirmed that my architecture had worked exactly as designed. The only failure came from bypassed protocol. Protocol I had written. Protocol they ignored. The company could not blame the system. They had to blame leadership, and leadership was starting to crack. One evening, I received a formal letter from corporate legal. They confirmed I was fully cleared of any involvement in the crash. It felt strange reading that. Cleared. Like I had been under suspicion. But I understood why. When systems fail, someone looks for sabotage first. The truth was simpler. Neglect. I forwarded the letter to my personal email and saved it. Not for revenge. For peace. That night, I signed the offer from the competitor company. They offered me the title of Senior Infrastructure Architect. Higher pay. Flexible schedule. A team that valued risk assessments. When I emailed my acceptance, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief. Pride. Because I did not fight to stay where I was not respected. I moved forward, and forward felt powerful. Trevor officially resigned the following Monday. The announcement was short. Trevor Whitmore has chosen to pursue other opportunities. I knew that phrase. It meant the board wanted distance. Naomi later told me that during the final meeting, the board questioned why my warnings were dismissed. Trevor reportedly said I was risk-averse to a fault. One executive replied, "Risk-aware is not risk-averse." That sentence stayed with me. Logan remained employed but lost project authority. He now worked under supervision. Shortcuts were no longer tolerated. Policies were rewritten. Ironically, many of those policies mirrored my original documentation almost word for word. The company was trying to stabilize itself. But trust once cracked does not repair overnight. And I was no longer part of that repair process. My first day at the new company felt different from the start. The lobby was quiet but confident. No rushed voices. No frantic emails. My new director, Caleb Turner, greeted me with a firm handshake. "We read your audit summary," he said. "We like engineers who speak up." He did not ask why I was terminated. He asked what I needed to succeed. That question alone felt like sunlight after months of shadow. During the first team meeting, I reviewed their infrastructure roadmap. I spotted 2 areas that needed stronger validation before launch. I hesitated for half a second. Old habits. Then I spoke clearly. "We should stage this over 2 cycles." Caleb nodded. "Do it." No debate. No eye roll. Just respect. Meanwhile, my former company continued to deal with fallout. An industry blog reported on the failed demo, not with dramatic headlines, but with subtle concern about internal governance. Investors noticed. Regulators asked questions about compliance oversight. The consultant's final report was blunt. The technical foundation was strong. Leadership decisions caused instability. I heard through Naomi that the board quietly restructured the IT department. New approval chains, mandatory validation sign-offs, clear documentation trails, the very systems I had advocated for. It was almost poetic. They had tried to remove the voice that warned them. Now they were building policies to ensure no one could ignore such warnings again. I did not feel victorious. I felt affirmed. Competence does not scream. It waits. And when tested, it stands. One afternoon, about a month into my new role, I received a LinkedIn message from an old colleague. "Your name is still on the migration documentation," he wrote. They updated nothing. I smiled at that, not because I needed recognition, but because truth had weight. My original patch sequence had been fully reinstated after the crash. Consultants insisted it remain untouched. Authored by Madeline Brooks, I printed the new internal standard policy they had shared publicly. It quoted language directly from my risk memo. Page 12, the same page Trevor had dismissed as theoretical. I pinned that printed page above my home desk, not as a trophy, as a reminder. Silence in the moment does not mean weakness. Sometimes silence is strength gathering evidence. 6 months after I was escorted out at noon, the industry looked different. My former company stabilized, but cautiously. They no longer rushed demos. They no longer skipped validation. The board replaced 2 additional executives during restructuring. Trust is fragile. My new team, however, thrived. We launched a major update after careful staging and validation. It performed flawlessly under stress testing. During the celebration meeting, Caleb said, "Madeline insisted we slow down. That saved us." The room clapped. I felt heat in my face, but this time it was pride, not humiliation. I remember the glass conference room, the cardboard box, the red badge light. Noon. Back then, it felt like the end of something. It was not. It was the clearing of space. Sometimes people ask if I planned any of it, if I knew the system would fail the same day I was fired. The answer is simple. I did not plan failure. I predicted risk. There is a difference. I never touched the server after I left. I never accessed files. I never removed anything. The crash happened because warnings were ignored. That matters, because revenge fueled by anger burns fast. But accountability built on facts lasts. When the server went down at 4:03 p.m., I was in my driveway. When leadership fell months later, I was already building something better. The timeline was not dramatic. It was logical. Cause, effect, documentation, truth. Sometimes justice is not loud. It is methodical. One rainy evening, I drove past my old office building. Not intentionally, just coincidence. The lights were still on inside. People still working. Systems still running. I did not feel bitterness. I felt distance. That building once felt like my future. Now it felt like a lesson. I remembered sitting in that glass room at 11:07 a.m., being told I was disposable. I remembered Trevor's smile. And I remembered saying, "You should delay the demo." He had laughed. That laugh echoed differently now. Not because he lost, but because he underestimated. Underestimating someone who documents everything is a mistake. I drove home without stopping. I did not need closure. I already had it. 4 months later, industry analysts published a case study about infrastructure governance. They did not mention my termination. They mentioned the crash. And they praised the company's corrected validation framework. That framework was mine. They called it a model for responsible deployment. I read the article twice. Then I closed my laptop, because recognition from strangers was not what satisfied me. What satisfied me was this. At my new company, junior engineers came to me with questions. They asked how to document risk properly. They wanted to learn. I taught them everything. Because when someone speaks up about danger, the goal is not to silence them. The goal is to listen. That is leadership, not volume, not ego. Listening. When I look back at that day, I still see the clock. 11:07 a.m. A cardboard box. A deactivated badge. At the time, it felt like humiliation. But noon was never my deadline. It was theirs. By 4:03 p.m., their server was down. By 6 months, their leadership had changed. By a year, their policies reflected my warnings. And me, I built something stronger. Not just systems. Confidence. I learned that your worth is not decided in a glass conference room. It is revealed when pressure tests the truth. They tried to erase my voice. Instead, they amplified it through their own mistakes. I did not need revenge. I needed patience. Because facts outlast arrogance. And when the room collapsed without me, I realized something simple. I was never disposable. I was essential. And I never looked back.